Exposed, 3 spine-chilling true road trip horrors you won't believe were actually discovered. The air buzzed with an unsettling energy as Sarah navigated the twisting backroads of South Carolina. The sun sank like a dying ember, flickers of pink and orange bleeding into the night. In the growing shadows, they caught sight of him, a wild-haired hitchhiker, frantically waving, his eyes wide with terror. "Please. I've been attacked by something monstrous in the woods." The panic in his voice sent chills down Sarah's spine. This was how their escape was supposed to start. Jake's pleading gaze met hers, bright with anxiety yet glimmering with hope. They had lost so much, now, being together again in a car felt like they were reclaiming a part of their lives. A sense of normalcy, however shattered, whispered to her. Against her better judgment, instincts blazing like sirens in her mind, she rolled down the window. As the hitchhiker climbed into the back seat, the hairs on the back of her neck prickled. What had they just invited into their lives? The quaintness of the sleepy rural community felt wrong from the moment they arrived. The diner they found was quiet, the smell of greasy food thick in the air. Eyes turned, faces strained, wooden smiles carved into the townsfolk's faces as they exchanged wary whispers. Sarah felt a rush of unease but tried to reassure Jake, who was hunched over, hands gripping his knees. "See? Just a normal diner," she said, forcing a smile. But as they ordered their food, the tense undercurrent grew more palpable, thickening the air. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. As they finished their meals, unease turned into fear. The hitchhiker's story crawled deeper into Jake's mind, winding tighter around his heart. "Mom, this isn't right, these people know something," he whispered, his voice quivering. The way the waitress tilted her head at them, eyes glinting with something sinister, set off alarm bells. They left the diner, stepping into the hushed night, the crunch of gravel beneath their feet too loud. Shadows danced, stretching across the road beneath the flickering streetlights as Jake's paranoia spiraled. What if the hitchhiker is part of something? What if these people are in on it? Before Sarah could respond, a whisper zipped through the air, a warning exchanged in the twisted expressions of the townsfolk. She turned, her heart racing. The hitchhiker's eyes, wild and chaotic while they spoke, flickered back to the town, and Sarah felt the ground beneath her shudder. As darkness deepened, a chilling realization slithered into their thoughts. There was something darker lurking in those trees, and whatever it was, they were not just passing through, they were being drawn deeper into a nightmare where the truth hid behind friendly smiles. The question loomed heavy: could they escape the horror that threatened to consume them? The shadows loomed larger, and with each passing moment, nobody could predict how close danger lurked. The air felt different now, thick with tension. Sarah glanced at Jake, who was staring straight ahead, his breath coming in quick bursts. The hitchhiker shifted nervously in the back seat, his reflection caught in the rearview mirror, eyes darting like a trapped animal. A sense of foreboding washed over her, making her skin prickle. As they moved further down the road, the woods loomed on either side, ancient and silent. Trees twisted into grotesque shapes against the dim light, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Sarah could feel every heartbeat echo in her ears, each whoosh of air suddenly too loud, too sinister. Suddenly, they hit a bump, and the hitchhiker yelped, slamming against the seat. "What was that? Did you see something?" he gasped, his voice shaky. Sarah's eyes snapped to the mirror, catching the glimmer of something in the shadows beyond the trees. "No, just the road," she managed to say, her fingers tightening on the steering wheel. But the doubt crept in: what was lurking just out of sight? "Mom, I don't like this." We should turn back, Jake insisted, his voice a frantic whisper. It's fine, Sarah replied, though her stomach twisted painfully. Her instincts screamed to pull away, to escape the suffocating dread that had settled like a fog in the car. The hitchhiker was staring at them, his expression a mix of terror and urgency. Please, he said, his voice barely audible over the wind. You don't understand. We're not safe. Safe from what? Jake asked, his eyes piercing through the worry. The hitchhiker's gaze flicked back to the dark woods. From it. The thing that hunts in the night. It sees you, just like it saw me. His ragged breathing turned shallow. That diner, they're all in on it. They feed it. A shiver danced down Sarah's spine. Questions spiraled in her mind. What could possibly be feeding something in those woods? The shadows seemed to breathe, and for every flicker of movement, tension wound tighter around her heart. As they reached a fork in the road, punishing uncertainty gripped them. One path led deeper into the woods, the other towards the town. A feral instinct screamed inside Sarah to flee, but part of her need to feel safe, to feel normal was pulling her into the dark, twisting path. Mom, left. We need to get back to safety. Jake urged, his voice a shrill whisper that made the hair on her arms stand up. But the forest ahead beckoned with an eerie allure that felt impossible to ignore. Just a little further, Sarah said, though her voice betrayed her own doubt. She turned the wheel, heading into the darkness. The deepening shadows shifted as they entered the woods, swallowed whole by the towering trees. The atmosphere thickened, suffocating in its stillness. Each breath she took was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. The lights of the town flickered distantly behind them, mere ghosts of safety. Then it happened. A sudden thud against the car. Sarah slammed on the brakes. What was that? The hitchhiker screamed, "It's here! It's here!" Panic surged through Sarah's veins as she scanned the surroundings. Shapes darted in the periphery, dark forms slipping between the trees. The unmistakable sound of something large crashing against the vehicle sent icy fingers crawling up her spine. What do we do? Jake cried, eyes wide with terror. Before she could answer, a low growl reverberated through the air, a deep, primal sound that chilled her blood. The forest held its breath, waiting, watching. Trapped between flight and fight, Sarah's heart raced as shadows closed in. Was escape still possible? The horror looming beyond the trees grew nearer. And then, a flash in the dark, a glint of eyes reflecting the faint light, hungry and malevolent. Run! She screamed, but before they could move, the darkness erupted. The nightmare had only just begun. The echoes of that scream faded into the oppressive quiet of the woods, but the danger was still palpable, thickening the air like a fog. Sarah's mind raced as her heart pounded violently within her chest. She gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, a primal instinct fighting against the overwhelming urge to flee. What was that? Jake gasped, eyes wide, scanning the trees outside. I don't know. We need to. A crackle of branches shattered the dark silence, and the car jolted again. The hitchhiker was trembling, his earlier intensity turning into sheer panic. Get us out of here. Now. His voice was a high-pitched whine, barely containing the raw terror that radiated off him. Before she could respond, shadowy figures darted past the car, just out of reach. They moved with unnatural speed, gliding between the trees, as if the darkness itself were alive. Did you see that? Sarah breathed, voice quaking. No. I don't want to see anything. Jake shouted, his small frame tense. He pressed himself against the door as if it could shield him from whatever hunted them. Stop it. Look. The hitchhiker pointed shakingly, and Sarah followed his gaze to a cluster of trees ahead. Something dark was lurking there, a twisted form hovering near that seemed to absorb the light around it, growing larger with every heartbeat. Get the door locked. Sarah barked, her hands fumbling hastily with the locks while dread crawled up her spine. The hitchhiker's eyes were darting between Sarah and the shadows, now filled with glistening moments of unimaginable horror. "We're going to stay in the car, all right? It can't get us in here." And then, the growl came again. Closer this time. Deeper. A sound that echoed with otherworldly resonance, begging them to slip into madness. The air felt electric, alive with an unseen threat that pressed against the glass like a breathless monster. "I want to go home," Jake whimpered, face wet with tears. "Please, Mom, please." A pang of guilt twisted in Sarah's heart. She had thought this trip could help them both heal them, but now it felt like a grave mistake. Desperation clawed at her throat. "We'll get out of here, I promise." "Mom," Jake pleaded, a sudden burst of strength rushed into his voice. "Drive. Now." Before she finished, the car rocked wildly. Something pounded against it, sending their bodies lurching forward. The haggard hitchhiker screamed again, the sound piercing and raw. "It's here. It's breaking in." Sarah's foot pressed fiercely against the gas pedal. The tires spun for a heart-stopping moment before they took off, wheels screeching, the headlights slicing through the enveloping dark. She barely dared to look in the mirror, but the reflection was undeniable. A pair of eyes gleamed hungrily from the treeline, twisting shapes morphing into something grotesque as they watched her flee. "Turn left," Jake shouted, panic driving his words. "Get away from it." I don't know where to go." Ahead was an opening dimly lit, but something within her hesitated. Why was it so quiet? The diner loomed in the distance now, a refuge whispered about in the hitchhiker's warning, yet dread gnawed at her gut. As Sarah surged toward it, the headlights glinted off something bizarre beneath the twisted neon sign. "It's waiting for you. Stop, stop." The hitchhiker screamed, but she couldn't slow down. And before she could process what happened, they burst into the parking lot. The headlights illuminated a figure outside, standing perfectly still. It was a woman clad in tattered clothing, her expression blank, eyes hollow. "Drive away, Sarah." Get out, but it was too late. The diner doors swung open as if pulled by an unseen breeze, revealing a scene that churned Sarah's stomach, something dark and terrible lurking just beyond the doorway. A thought struck her, freezing her cold. Did the diner help them, or was it part of the nightmare? As the hitchhiker leaned forward, his eyes wide, foaming with terror, she caught one last glimpse of the woods, where the shadows moved again, creeping closer, hungrier than ever. "Why did we come here?" she gasped as a shudder swept through the group, knowing this wasn't just a fork in the road. But whispers beckoned from the diner and a single thought twisted her heart: the true horror was just beginning. The moment the diner door swung wide, a chill swept through the air. Sarah hesitated, biting her lip. Shadows settled like fog around her, wrapping tighter, pressing her solidarity and resolve to flee. The hitchhiker's frantic breaths echoed in her ear, and for a split second, the world seemed to pause. "Get inside!" he screamed, his face a mask of terror. "Don't let it catch you." That one word, it spoke volumes. Sarah's gut twisted. Whatever that it was, it had some connection to the horror lurking in the dark. "Mom!" Jake urged, his voice small and trembling, mustering every ounce of courage. She swung open the door. The neon lights flickered, casting eerie shadows over the cracked pavement, and she stepped out, heart racing. The diner looked different up close, an old building with chipped paint and a scent of decaying wood wafting through the air. The hitchhiker darted past her, but uncertainty gripped Sarah. Should they trust this place? "Sarah! Come on!" he yelled, glancing back as if shadows danced just behind him. She moved forward, dragging Jake along even as dread loomed higher. Inside, the diner felt wrong. The warmth of flickering lights didn't erase the chill that crawled across her skin. Booths lined the walls, filled with a thin layer of dust. Cobwebs hung in corners, fluttering with the slightest draft. Yet, a dozen pairs of eyes stared hollowly at them from every chair, fixed and unblinking. It was as if no one had moved in ages. "Where are the people?" Jake whispered, clutching Sarah's arm tightly. "Maybe they're just closed." Her voice faltered, uncertainty creeping in with every step. They walked to the counter, where a faded menu hung crookedly. Items listed turned her stomach: grilled horror, nightmare pie, free refills on your life. With hesitation, she pressed the bell. The sound echoed through the silence like an alarm. "Nothing." "It's a trap," the hitchhiker muttered, glancing at the door. "It's waiting outside. We need to leave." Just as anxiety swelled within her, a figure emerged from the kitchen, a waitress, dressed in an old-fashioned uniform, her face pale and drawn, as if carved from the same wood they were surrounded by. "Can I help you?" Her voice was hollow, like a ghost lost in time. Jake recoiled, hiding behind Sarah. "I don't like her, just tell her we need to leave." The hitchhiker hissed. Before Sarah could respond, the lights flickered violently. The waitress's smile widened, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too slick. She took a step closer. "You can't leave until you eat." A sudden smash of glass shattered the tension. Outside, a form lunged against the diner window, a twisted shadow clawing at the fragile barrier. The others inside shifted, their hollow eyes suddenly glinting with hunger and desire. "Their eyes!" Jake screamed, his body shaking. "They're hungry." Panic surged through Sarah like wildfire. "We can't stay here." She pulled at Jake and turned to run, but the doors slammed shut. They were sealed in. The waitress laughed, and the other patrons began to rise, their movements slow yet purposeful, inching closer. The growl from the woods echoed in the diner, clawing at the last threads of reason. "What do you want from us?" Sarah shouted, desperation clawing at her throat. "Your fear," the waitress replied, tilting her head, her smile grotesquely wide. "Your life. We feed on it." Breath quickening, Sarah glanced around, searching for an escape. A single neon flicker caught her eye. The back door. "Run!" she screamed, grabbing Jake tightly. With every ounce of strength, she hurled toward the exit, knowing whatever waited outside could be better than this madness. As they charged toward the door, the other patrons surged forward, closing in with horrific intensity, blocking any last chance of escape. The growl outside morphed into a scream of fury, a sound so deep it shook the very walls. They burst through the door, tumbling into the night, but the shadows waited and shifted, the woods alive with terrifying menace. "What the hell is out here?" The hitchhiker gasped, skidding to a halt, and at that moment, Sarah knew. Whatever it wasn't just a creature of the night. It was far more sinister, intertwined with the diner, with fate itself, and it craved something else. Just as they turned to escape into the wilderness, a thunderous crack echoed from the diner behind them. The ground beneath their feet trembled, a haunting whisper growing louder in the space between heartbeats. Come back! What had they unleashed? What awaited them in the taint of the woods? The woods loomed ahead, thick and dark, swallowing bursts of moonlight as if it were an insatiable beast. Sarah's heart thundered in her chest, each beat echoing the terror that coursed through her veins. The shadows swayed, seemingly alive, dancing at the edge of her vision. She felt the hitchhiker's south presence close, a shared urgency overwhelming the fear that threatened to consume her. "Did you see that?" Jake whispered, his voice trembling. "What was it?" "I don't know," Sarah replied, trying to maintain her composure. "But we have to keep moving." "Where?" The hitchhiker interjected, his breath coming in rapid gasps. "We can't go far, it's out there, and it can smell fear." Jake shivered at those words, instinctively tightening his grip on Sarah's hand. She could feel his small fingers tremble. "Mom?" he said again, his voice barely a whisper. "Stay close," she urged, dragging Jake further away from the diner. Each step felt heavy, like wading through treacle, the air thick with the stench of damp earth and impending doom. She glanced back at the diner, its fluorescent lights flickering in a manic rhythm. The laughter of the waitress echoed, unsettling and unnatural. With every moment they stood still, Sarah sensed something creeping from the tree, inching closer. "We have to find a way out of here," she hissed. "We need a car, something." "As if any car will do us any good now," the hitchhiker muttered, shaking his head. "We're stuck between a nightmare and another." The dread coiled in her stomach tightened like a vice. They were prey, and whatever was lurking out here was hunting them. With sudden resolve, Sarah steered them toward a narrow path that led deeper into the woods. "We can't go back now," she urged, pushing past the underbrush. The darkness swallowed the sound of their footsteps, but an unrelenting rustle came from somewhere behind them. It felt like they were being followed. "Mom, please. I want to go home," Jake cried, his small voice breaking in the vastness of the night. "Shoo, Jake," she whispered sharply. "We can't make noise. It'll hear us." Then, ahead, a faint glow broke through the tree. A light. Hope flickered within her, igniting the instinct to run. "There. Let us go toward it." The three of them rushed forward, but the darkness slithered closer, tendrils of shadow reaching out. Suddenly, a loud snap shattered the night, like the cracking of a large branch twirling through the air. They all froze, breaths caught. Their eyes darted nervously through the trees, brushing past the looming figures that seemed to leer at them through the foliage. "What was that?" the hitchhiker asked, voice quaking. Sarah began, but the trees shifted, and a low growl reverberated through the underbrush. It was near, too near. "Run!" she commanded, lunging forward just as a shadow crashed through the bushes. The hitchhiker took Jake's other hand, and they fled blindly as the sound of claws scraped against bark rang out behind them. Panic rushed through Sarah's body, her mind racing. They couldn't keep running like this. They needed a plan, a refuge. The light seemed closer now, but fear blurred her judgment. What if it was more dangerous? Just then, they stumbled into a clearing and skidded to a halt. In the center stood an old, rusted car, its paint peeling and windows dark. The vehicle looked like it hadn't seen the road in years, but it might be their only chance. "Get in!" she shouted, already pulling the door open. But something was wrong. The moment she touched the handle, a sickly chill washed over her, as though the car itself had a pulse, an awareness. What if it's a trap? The hitchhiker breathed, glancing back at the shadows creeping closer. "I don't care," Sarah snapped, urgency pushing her. Better a trap than whatever's coming. But as they clambered inside, a scream erupted from the darkness, echoing through the trees, a high-pitched keening that tore through the air. Goosebumps prickled her skin, and she suddenly felt that whatever awaited them here was more than just the ghosts of the diner. Shivers raced up her spine. The scream morphed into horrible laughter, and for the first time, Sarah realized the woods were alive, feeding on the fear they brought into it. "What did I say about fear?" the hitchhiker said, his voice a mere tremor. They couldn't escape it. It was here, in the very bones of this place, waiting for one last moment. With a sudden jolt, the headlights flickered to life, cutting through the dark. But was it salvation, or something much worse? As the laughter grew closer, so did the realization, they were not as alone as they thought. Something was reaching out in the night, eager for its meal, and they were the feast. The light flickered, and for an agonizing moment, Sarah was left wondering. Would it save them or seal their fate? The moment the car flickered to life, Sarah felt a spark of desperation mixed with hope. She glanced at Jake, eyes wide and terrified, as he gripped the door handle, knuckles white. The hitchhiker's face mirrored similar uncertainty. The darkness around them thickened, every rustle sharp and pronounced, like the woods were whispering secrets. Just outside the safety of the car, the laughter continued, a chilling symphony of madness. She quickly slammed the door shut, a metallic thud echoing under the looming trees. "Start it," the hitchhiker urged, panic cracking his voice. I can't," Sarah stammered, her fingers trembling over the cracked dashboard. She jiggled the key in an attempt to turn the ignition, but nothing happened. "The battery must be dead." "No. It can't be." Jake's voice quavered. He pressed closer to her, searching her face for reassurance. Before she could respond, something slammed against the side of the car, the impact shuddering through the worn metal. Jake jumped, an involuntary gasp escaping his lips as a shadow loomed closer. Sarah dared to look through the window, a brief glimpse of something pallid and grotesque, a mouth stretched wide in a rictus of friending darkness. "Get away from the window," she screamed as she pulled Jake back, shoving him onto the floor. The hitchhiker scrambled in alongside them, wide eyes reflecting sheer dread. "What the hell is that?" he gasped. "I don't know, but it felt false," the silence amplifying her fear. The thrum of the engine was absent, replaced by the sound of claws scraping against the sides of the car. The hunter was circling, searching for its prey. "Please, don't let it get us," Jake moaned, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Just stay quiet," Sarah hissed, biting her lip to suppress her own rising panic. She was acutely aware of the darkness pressing against the glass, wild and hungry, the laughter still drifting, taunting and vile. In a moment of courage, she turned toward the passenger seat, rummaging through the glove box. "There has to be something here," she muttered, shoving aside crumpled papers and stale air. "A flashlight." She took it, but doubt twisted her stomach. What good was this against whatever that was? "Shine it outside," the hitchhiker urged, breathing heavily. "It might scare it off." Swallowing hard, Sarah turned the flashlight on. The beam cut through the thick shadows, narrowly illuminating trees that writhed with life. The laughter shrieked into silence, replaced by an unsettling stillness that churned her stomach. They held their breath, listening for movement. Sarah's heart raced, fingers pressed against the cold metal of the flashlight. What was lurking beyond the mind-numbing haze of darkness? Then, in a blur of shadows, something lunged at the car, its form almost fluid, gliding with unnatural speed. The beam caught a flash of matted fur, torn flesh, and eyes. Oh, those eyes! They glowed briefly in the light, wide with a hunger so primal it shook her to the core. "Start the car. Start it now," she yelled, her voice breaking as fear spiraled into mania. The hitchhiker fumbled with the ignition, repeatedly twisting the key, a frantic rhythm bouncing off the claustrophobic walls of the car. "Come on. Please." With one last desperate turn, the engine sputtered, roared to life, and Jake howled in relief. Sarah, sensing their brief moment of reprieve, dropped the flashlight to the floor. But relief was short-lived. The beast lunged again, smashing into the windshield with sickening force, glass cracking under the pressure. Sarah screamed, pressing against Jake as he cried out, and in that moment, everything seemed to slow, the world shifting into an unimaginable horror. "Back! Back!" she shouted, but the car lurched forward, unsteady, as the hitchhiker slammed his foot down on the gas. They flew forward, tires screeching against the gravel, the crash of branches overhead signaling their escape. But the trees began to twist into an unholy maze, more alive than before, branches clawing at the metal frame of the car, and Sarah knew they weren't just escaping danger. They were plunging deeper into the nightmare. As the woods closed around them, swallowing their frantic cries, one question echoed in Sarah's mind: would they ever find a way out, or were they trapped forever in this waking nightmare? The engine sputtered, and the headlights flickered, casting shadows that twisted on the dim forest floor. And in the darkness, the sound of laughter returned, louder, more sinister than ever. What other horrors awaited them in this living dread? The car jolted wildly as they careened down the narrow dirt path, branches clawing at the metal like desperate hands trying to pull them back into the grip of the woods. Sarah's heart pounded, each beat thrumming in her ears, drowning out the panic-filled breaths from Jake and the hitchhiker. Faster. We have to go faster. Jake screamed, his voice cracking under the weight of fear. Keep your eyes on the road. Sarah snapped, glancing at the rearview mirror. Nothing but inky darkness stared back at her, yet the feeling of being hunted suffocated her. She couldn't shake the lingering terror, it loomed just beyond the veil of the trees. Suddenly, the engine sputtered again, a weak gasp that sent a chill down her spine. Not now. Please, not now. She cried, heart racing as the headlights dimmed. The last remnants of light struggled against the encroaching shadows, and in that fading glow, she could swear she saw shapes moving, twisting, writhing figures that danced just beyond her vision. What else is in here? The hitchhiker breathed, his fingers fumbling over the glove compartment. Panic gnawed at their edges. We need a weapon. With trembling hands, the hitchhiker dug through the clutter. Sarah fixed her gaze ahead, knowing every second counted. But the sensation of eyes on them made her skin crawl. The air grew thick with anticipation. We can't just rely on luck. The hitchhiker shouted, pulling out an old baseball bat caked in dirt. This might help. Yeah, if we can even stop. Sarah retorted, gripping the wheel harder. Just then, the car made an ungodly clunk, sputtering like it was fighting for breath. A growl echoed from behind, primal and hellish, and suddenly, the laughter erupted around them again, echoing through the trees like a sinister celebration. We have to pull over. The hitchhiker yelled. Are you insane? Jake cried. Trust me. It'll be worse if they catch us moving. Reluctantly, Sarah stepped on the brakes, the tires screeching as they came to a jolting stop. The laughter died immediately, replaced by an oppressive silence that clawed at them from every direction. What are we doing? Jake whimpered, sinking into the back seat. We need to listen, the hitchhiker said, eyes darting with an unnatural urgency. As they sat frozen in the dark, hearts pounding, Sarah's breath caught in her throat when she noticed a glimmer of light far away in the trees. It flickered uncertainly like a signal, or maybe a trap. Do you see that? She whispered, a mixture of curiosity and dread bubbling within her. Yeah, the hitchhiker murmured, his voice barely a breath. It looks like a house or something. We could try to find help, Jake said, hope bleeding into his voice. The thought of escaping this madness danced in his eyes. Or it could lead straight into their den, Sarah warned, a chill creeping down her spine. I don't want to die out here. Jake's voice cracked. We need to take the chance. The debate hung thick in the air, hovering over them like an impending storm. The light flickered again, brighter this time, urging them closer, tempting them with promises they couldn't resist. Okay, we'll go to the light, Sarah finally said, heart racing. As they unfastened their seatbelts, a sudden crash erupted behind them, the sound jagged and fierce. The forest erupted from its slumber. The creature reappeared, only this time it was joined by others, shadows materializing in the depths of the trees. Get back in. The hitchhiker shouted, panic hijacking his voice. But it was too late, the darkness surged forward, ready to engulf them whole. Just as they ducked inside the car, the lights began to flicker again, dancing wildly as if in response to the chaos. Sarah screamed as the thud of something huge slammed against the roof, the car rocking perilously. Then, suddenly, silence fell again, thick and suffocating. They held their breath, fear drowning them in a deluge of shadows. Sarah, Jake whispered, trembling. What if they know we're here? Her heart stopped. The laughter returned, sharper, more sinister. The forest closed in, and outside, the shadows shifted, waiting. What awaited them in the dark might be worse than the monster itself. A sharp crack of thunder pierced the oppressive silence, and the wind howled through the trees, echoing Jake's rising panic. Sarah's grip tightened on the steering wheel, sweat pooling in her palms. The pitch-black forest felt alive, thrumming with a dark pulse, sneering at their vulnerability. "Is it gone?" Jake whispered, a trembling question that hung in the thick air. Sarah strained to listen, but the only sound was her accelerated heartbeat syncing with the roar of the engine. A heaviness settled in the car, thick as fog. The hitchhiker gripped the baseball bat, eyes darting to the shadows, anticipation crackling like electricity. I don't think it is," he finally said, and as if summoned by his words, the laughter returned. It slithered through the trees, mocking them, echoing sinister promises that twisted Sarah's stomach into knots. "Shut up," Jake blurted, rattled by the sound. "Just shut up." But the mocking laughter wasn't the only thing haunting them. Something stirred outside the car. The silhouettes shifted, creeping closer, inching into the periphery of her vision. "We need to move," Sarah urged, barely daring to breathe. "Where?" the hitchhiker asked, anxiety spilling over. "There's nowhere to run." The laughter grew louder, blending with deep, guttural growls. It felt like a chant, an invocation, summoning the beasts of the night. Outside, dark forms slithered along the edges of the forest, weaving through the trees like smoke taking shape. They were drawing themselves closer, coaxing them out into the abyss. "Look! The light!" Jake suddenly shouted, pointing toward the flickering beacon that beckoned them. The thought of safety ignited a spark of hope. "It could be worse over there," Sarah warned, yet the desperation in her voice faltered, battling the instinct to flee toward the light's false promise. Without waiting for another moment, Jake flung open the door, adrenaline fueling his reckless choice. "I'm going. This way." "Jake, no!" Sarah cried, but it was too late. He darted into the darkness, swallowed by the night. "Stay with me!" the hitchhiker yelled, though Sarah's pulse was already hammering in her ears. She glanced at the door, uncertainty wrenching at her. Should she follow? What about the hitchhiker? But Jake's figure vanished into the woods, and she could only think of that flickering light a potential salvation. Every instinct screamed to go after him, but she felt anchored in place, fear rooting her to the car like a tree in the soil. "Come on," the hitchhiker urged, panic brightening his eyes. "We can't stay here. They'll find us." His grip on the bat tightened as he looked to the surrounding shadows, terrified. Just as the two of them hesitated, the laughter transformed into shrills, a cacophony of madness that filled the air. One after another, the dark figures began to emerge from the woods, eyes glowing like embers in the night. "Go! Now!" The hitchhiker slammed his bat against the roof in desperation. Sarah rehearsed a breath, tasting fear in the back of her throat. With a sudden resolve, she opened the door. The biting cold and horror swarmed her like a blanket. She jumped out, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Jake!" she screamed, lost between the sound of the darkness and the fear swelling in her heart. Ahead, the flickering light pulsed, fragile and deceptive. It might save them or lead them straight into the jaws of death. They rushed toward the light, but with every step, the trees seemed to darken, closing in as if to snuff out those who dared to enter. Sarah's heart raced as shadows lunged and shrieked around them. "What if it's a trap?" she gasped to the hitchhiker, her breath hitching in her chest. "This is our chance," he yelled, dragging her forward, plunging deeper into the unknown. They raced closer, drawn by a perilous mix of fear and hope. They had no idea that safety might be far worse than the terrors lurking just behind them. What lay ahead was more sinister than any darkness in the woods, and Jake was nowhere to be found. The flickering light grew brighter, its glow pulsating like a heartbeat, taunting them to come closer. Sarah dipped her shoulder as branches clawed at her jacket. The shadows lurking just out of her line of sight felt hungry, like they were thirsting for warmth. "Just a bit further," the hitchhiker urged, his voice strained. Panic flared in his eyes as the laughter grew more frenetic behind them. Jack. She started again, but the name caught in her throat. Each syllable seemed to summon more darkness behind her. They had to focus, there was no turning back now. The light revealed a clearing, a sudden break in the oppressive trees. In the center stood an old wooden cabin, crooked and aged, with boards peeling like the skin of something long dead. Its windows glimmered faintly, flickers of promise amid overwhelming despair. Was it an oasis in the nightmare or another snare? Should we knock? The hitchhiker asked, biting his lip as he stared at the door that hung askew on rusty hinges. We might not have a choice. Sarah swallowed hard, shivering despite the thin layer of sweat on her skin. We can't stay out here, or her breath hitched as a fierce growl rumbled through the trees, a low, bone-chilling sound that reverberated in the pit of her stomach. It made her knees weak and the hitchhiker grip his bat like it was a lifeline. Inside. Now. She commanded, and they darted toward the cabin, the laughter clawing at their backs like jagged nails. The splintered door creaked as they pushed it open, an old protest that echoed in the hollow darkness inside. A musty smell assaulted their senses, old wood and something sharper like iron. The hitchhiker stepped in first, his eyes wide, scanning the shadows cast by a single flickering bulb hanging above. "Hello?" he called, his voice quivering. Silence wrapped around them, thick and intrusive. Sarah followed him in and shut the door, bolting it with shaking hands. Outside, muffled whispers danced just beyond their safety, promises of chaos waiting to explode. She turned to the hitchhiker, who was already scanning the cluttered room. A rickety table sat in the center, littered with dust-coated odds and ends. On the walls hung tattered drawings, abstract shapes twisted into forms that crawled across her eyes. "Do you think anyone lives here?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know," she replied, heart pounding in her chest. "But it feels wrong." Just as she stepped closer, a noise echoed from the back of the cabin, a sharp thud followed by a rustle, as if something had shifted in the dark. "Did you hear that?" she gasped, pressing her back against the wall. The hitchhiker nodded slowly, his eyes wide with fear. "Maybe it's just an animal," he suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. But before Sarah could respond, the thud came again, louder this time. The sound rolled over them, a menacing echo wrapped in malice. It felt like a heartbeat thrumming against the stillness, a call to attention. "Let's check it out," the hitchhiker said, every word a challenge to their instincts. "Are you crazy?" Sarah protested, frozen in place. "We don't know what's back there." He was already moving toward an open doorway at the back of the room, the very gateway to horrors that might be lurking unseen. "Jake, he might be back there," he whispered, determination creeping back to his voice. For a split second, the flickering light above dimmed, shadows darting across the walls like tangled memories. Her heart raced. "Wait!" she called, but he was already gone into the darkness, swallowed by the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as she stood alone, the door behind her a fragile barrier against whatever hunted them. "Jake!" she whispered into the silence, the word escaping like a prayer into the void. As she glanced at the doorway he had vanished into, a terrible thought bloomed in her mind. What if Jake wasn't back there at all? What if something else had claimed him? The chilling truth was waiting for her in the dark, and she was running out of time to find out. Sarah's heart raced as she stood alone in that dimly lit cabin, the air thick with dread. Every instinct screamed for her to flee, but she couldn't leave Jake, and she couldn't abandon the hitchhiker, the only two people left in this nightmare. Caving into desperation, Sarah called into the darkness beyond the doorway, "Hitchhiker! Come back!" Her voice trembled, echoed by the haunting silence. There was no response. The thought of facing whatever terror waited behind that door paralyzed her. But another sound, a soft whimper, filtered back, almost like a memory of Jake, and ignited a spark of courage. "Jake!" she cried, rushing toward the entrance. As she stepped through the doorway, the darkness welcomed her like an old friend, cold and suffocating. Fear coiled tightly around her, but the thought of losing her son pushed her forward. She willed her heart to quiet, forcing confidence into her hesitant steps. "Mom! Where are you?" Jake's voice sliced through the thick darkness ahead. "Jake, I'm here." Sarah pushed deeper into the shadows, squinting to see anything beyond the feeble light. The beam of her flashlight flickered ominously. "Stay where you are." The hitchhiker's echoing footsteps caught her attention, and she turned to see him approaching from the back room, a look of concern etched across his face. "I thought I heard him. We need to find him fast, before what? Before the darkness consumed them?" A distant growl rumbled beyond the threshold of the cabin, a hungry reminder of the beasts outside, pressing cruelly against their fragile hopes. "Let us go," Sarah urged. She felt a surge of urgency, pulling the hitchhiker along. They crept through the dimly lit cabin, surveying every corner. Dust motes danced in their tainted memories, swirling around as if mocking their predicament. Then they heard it again, the muffled cries, somehow both near and far. "Jake!" They both shouted in unison. "Over here!" came Jake's choked reply. The sound raced their hearts as they hurried toward it, plunging into what felt like a web of horror. They rounded a corner and found Jake, huddled in a small space beside a stack of old crates. Relief flooded Sarah's body, heavy but welcome, pushing back the burgeoning dread. "Jake!" she exclaimed, pulling him into a tight embrace. His small body trembled against her, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I thought I lost you. I was so scared, Mom," he cried, his voice muffled in her shoulder. "Listen, we have to go now," the hitchhiker urged, scanning the shadows with wide eyes. Suddenly, a deep rumbling reverberated from outside, a primal snarl that shattered the moment something was closing in. "Out the back!" the hitchhiker yelled, adrenaline pumping through his veins as he grabbed Sarah's arm. They hurried together, pushing past the clutter and debris of the cabin toward the rear door. They burst through into the night, the cold air hitting them like a tidal wave. But their sense of freedom was short-lived. The shadows were still alive, a dark wave crashing toward them. "Run!" Sarah yelled. The three of them darted away from the cabin, pounding through the unyielding terrain, racing away from the horror that lurked behind them. The trees whispered against their skin, clawing at them in a frantic dance, but they didn't look back. Domination surged in the wind as they panted heavily, heartbeats sinking in a disillusioned rhythm. "A little further," the hitchhiker urged, his voice strained as they sprinted into a small clearing. A path lay ahead, winding between the trees, a slim chance to escape. Yet the moment they stepped onto that dubious trail, a blood-curdling roar echoed behind them. The woods came alive with malevolent laughter, crackling through the dark like a symphony of chaos. "Please, let us get away," Jake sobbed, resolved only by the warmth of Sarah's grip holding onto him. "Just keep going," she cried, pushing him ahead. Their feet pounded harder, lungs burned, the laughter chased them, growing closer, darker. Shadows morphed into grotesque figures among the trees, hungry eyes watching their every move. Just when hope seemed lost, bright lights appeared through the trees ahead. A clearing, a final refuge. Maybe it was a trap, but there was no other choice. "Inside! Go!" Sarah screamed, and they rushed toward the light, throwing themselves into a strange, muddled hope. They stumbled into an open field, the moon casting its focus upon a distant highway, jagged and twisted, as if beckoning them home. Relief washed over them, a precious moment. There, in the distance, a car's headlights flickered like a beacon. "Run!" the hitchhiker shouted again, leading the way. With renewed energy, they raced across the grass, fueled by the flickering promise of escape. But just as they reached the road, a sudden weight seized the air, thickening a shadow slipped between them, rising from the darkness, and it halted them cold. The spectre unveiled its true form, monstrous fangs bared, eyes like burning coals, thirsting for their fear. "No!" Sarah shrieked, and in that raw moment, she felt all her strength, all her love for Jake surge to the forefront, igniting the dim air around them. "We will not be your prey." With a force she didn't know she possessed, she threw the flashlight straight at the creature's snarling maw. Light burst forth, illuminating it in a blinding flash. The beast recoiled, shrieking in pain, and the shadows around it shattered, losing their hold. Sarah took Jake's hand. "Go!" They surged onto the highway, racing toward the distant lights glowing stronger. Their breaths echoed like a drum, pounding the resolute rhythm of escape into the air. They ran, pulling Jake along, each footfall resonating with freedom as they crossed onto asphalt, leaving behind the darkness finally behind them. The danger began to melt away as they knelt together on the shoulder of the road, heartbeats calming. The hitchhiker exhaled sharply, still shaking with fear, still alive. "We made it," he gasped, and though the woods whispered in the distance, he turned to them with a grateful smile. Finally, the weight of the nightmare lifted as they stood united, embraced in the light of newfound hope. "Let us get out of here," Sarah said softly, drawing Jake closer. With relief washing over them, they awaited the flash of headlights in the distance, leaving behind those haunting woods forever. As they embraced freedom, Sarah knew they'd never be the same, but they would keep living, together, navigating their paths forward. They had faced the darkness and survived, but she would keep them close and strong, never letting fear overtake them again. If you found this story thrilling, subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm, it really makes a difference. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. Instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.